Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Here I am. Okay. Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, December 17th. 2021. We're, like 8 days now away from the big day in the Christian calendar anyway. And the big day we all have to celebrate, or else it's a war or something like that. We're allowed to say Merry Christmas again. So Merry Christmas to everybody. I don't feel particularly Christmas me at the moment. And that's why, because what is Christmas me? It's nothing. So you don't worry about it if you don't feel that. But I don't know. It might be the fact that the Hallmark Channel stuff is on the TV all the time, or Lifetime Network things. I don't know. It's becoming anti-Christmassy. Enough. Anyway, plenty to catch up on today. Plenty to distract myself with as well, but I won't bother you with that stuff. We'll keep up with what's going on in the mainstream. Oh, and thankfully, thank God, we might as well say so. Finally, my PayPal money has cleared, and now it's in the account, and I can pay Scott. So, hey, finally, okay, Scott, I'm sorry I'm late with all this. But this was an unusually long time for it's supply chain, for the electronic supply chain. I don't know what was taking so long, but it was taking forever for PayPal to clear that money from my bank. But it's clear now, so thank you, and thank you to everyone out there who helps put money in the bank account so that I can give it to Scott for doing all of his dedicated work and saving me the most painful part of post-production, actually. So I very much appreciate it for everybody involved, including, by the way, one new donor who has gone as yet unacknowledged, but I have a little note here to myself just the other day, welcoming to the Patreon family, Candy Doriski. I hope I have that name correct, and the pronunciation doesn't look too hard. But thank you very much for joining our little Patreon family and keeping up appearances here at the KITM World Headquarters to an extent. It's not that I'm decorating with your money. It's that if there's a little bit extra in there, I don't run around freaking out all the time that I can't afford anything. So that's good. And, that's helpful news for sure. Thank you to everybody. And we reran just the other day, I guess during the Thanksgiving break, with the Thanksgiving program from last year, in which I ran down the list of everybody who had contributed to the show along the way. Thank you very much once again. We appreciate all of your support, especially after our, calving off from the Daily Kos family and the additional financial support that came with that, now gone, having fallen by the wayside. And many of you stepped up to help fill that gap. We're still not back where we were when they were partially supporting us, but we are well on the way to recovery, and I appreciate everybody's help in all of this, and it helps make sure that I get up in the morning. Now I can say not only will people be disappointed if I don't get up and do a show in the morning when the urge strikes me to do something crazy like that, but I can also now honestly tell myself, well, people will feel like they paid for something and didn't get what they paid for, and now you have to get up. It's a big motivator, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. And what do I follow on up with? Do more. I really set myself up there, but that's the message. It could always be more. The total support, it makes it possible to do. That's for sure. It covers the expenses, allows me to pay a little bit to Scott, and that's helpful. But yeah, I wouldn't exactly call it a living. But, the money comes from elsewhere too. We do other things in this house. We have our production staff out doing the other day job that they do besides producing the show. That's what really makes it possible. The biggest thank you needs to go to her. So everyone, thank her in your thoughts and prayers this holiday season. How about that? I hope she's upstairs and didn't hear this. Okay, well, anyway, I can't see exactly whether she's around the corner or not, but I hope not at this point. All right, plenty of stories to catch up on that are relevant and real for the rest of the world, as opposed to either just me or the weirdo circle that wakes up with me in the morning and listens to these stories. Let's see. What have we got? Let's, oh, look at this. Oh, I gotta look at this story. I don't know what it is. I just happened to see Brian Beutler tweeting something that caught my eye because it had to do with Virginia. Just seconds ago, tweeting, if Ralph Northam has the power to force the legislature back into session, he should use it. Then these state senators should face primaries. Oh, that sounds bad. And it's in the New York Times. So it's even worse because it's not just a local squabble that got written up in the Virginia pages of the Washington Post. It made it to the New York Times. All right. Well, I will check into that, what that is, in just a second here. Just looking in on other stories that might be happening here. And, of course, we have the morning tweet from Bill. That's always a good pace setter for the day. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, and as a courtesy to you, his valued listeners, Kagro will not be playing a continuous loop of that effing guy's fart at 5106. Probably not. Anyway, yeah, I think you read me wrong on that one, Bill. And I think that you did it on purpose, too. Somewhere on the desktop is that clip, too. And I think I never put it in the soundboard, but I'm doing it now. You can hear me talking slow and funny, and that is me trying to do technical things on the show. All right, I did isolate it at one point, and by isolating it, it's the only time you can actually really hear the thing if you listen to the tape. We're going to have to talk about that tape again, too. What are we talking about? Let's do this story first because it really is big and you really should do this. I listened to it the other day, but I listened to it for a different reason. It was the fart. But the reason that you should be listening to it is echoed, like that fart, by Jen Hayden, Scout Finch, our own good friend Scout Finch, that you can find her on Twitter and, of course, all over Daily Kos for that. But here's what she had to say this morning. Was it this morning? No, it was yesterday afternoon. So, okay. But for some reason, I must have seen it retweeted this morning. She says, I'm listening to the Trump call with Raffensperger again, and the desperation in Trump's voice is really something. Desperate and criminal. I couldn't agree more, and you really should listen for that reason. If you haven't heard it in a while, now's the time. The DOJ cannot just look the other way while serious crimes have been committed. I actually think that is good advice. It's a long tape. I actually considered briefly this morning, what would people do if I just played the tape this morning on the show? It's like it's almost an hour long. I mean, that would eat things up pretty good. I'll say that. But, by the way, you can find it. The Washington Post published the transcript and the tape, and you can play it and listen to it for yourself. And I forget where I put it. But I actually, because I was making the joke about and reminding everybody yesterday, I just tweeted out of the blue. I didn't realize that Jen had been listening to the tape, I guess a couple hours before I did it, too. And I just tweeted yesterday because I was reminded by seeing the clip on my desktop. Just a reminder to everybody, it's almost coming up on the anniversary of the event. Trump totally farted in that call with Red Raffensperger. And he rolls right past it, but he does. He says, excuse me, after he does it, but he does it in a way that's sort of indistinguishable from him interrupting people. You know, when people start talking and he starts saying, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, that's wrong and you should be arrested, right? That sort of thing. But he does it and then just sort of rolls past it like this happens all the time, which is the only thing he can do if you're if you're an old man and you're running around farting all the time. If you're a young man running around farting all the time, that's all you can do. So as we were pointing out, like, okay, well, at least he's polite about it, and he says, excuse me. But it's kind of funny, and the excuse me is completely out of context. I just took the couple seconds during which he does it, and I did. I put it in the soundboard. But he is interrupting somebody and talking about something completely different and trying to talk about the remedies that he's looking for other states to use to reverse the election. But then all of a sudden, I'll play it. It's only like 2-second clip, right?
We found a way in other states, later. Excuse me.
Yeah, there you go. We found a way in other states, and then you just hear that low sort of, and then excuse me.
We found a way in other states, later.
There it is. We found it before you hear it. I gotta turn the volume way up. Let's see. I'm gonna boost the volume. What am I playing in here? Oh yes, okay. It's in soundboard. All right, it's gonna blow your ears off. I mean the words too, but also the fart probably. All right, I'm 12. But I'm doing it again.
We found a way in other states, later. Excuse me. We found a way in other states, later. Excuse me.
Yeah, you get it?
We found a way in other states, later. Excuse me.
Okay, that's over with. So Bill said I wasn't going to do this in a constant loop. But, I told you he was probably wrong. And that's the way it looks. All right. Oh, shoot. Now I forgot. What volume did I have this thing set to before I turned it all the way up, and now I don't know. All right, well, intro and outro music is just gonna, that too will blow your ears off. But okay, anyway, that's not the big news. There is no big news actually about what's in the call, except in the sense that Jen Hayden has made it news again, and I too have made it news again by playing the fart. But the serious notion here, I had to comment on it. Just a little bit. Everybody really should go and listen to that tape again. I listened again too, though admittedly I was looking for the fart. And it's really remarkable how long Trump goes on for. I'm reading my own tweet here now, so it doesn't sound quite natural, but it is really remarkable how long this thing goes on for. And that he's just pressing the most insane claims in this thing. And he's also, as I'm mentioning here, he's no bystander. You can tell he's not like my advisors are really driving the conversation and I'm here to lend authority to it. I mean, they're doing this by my order. He's driving the call. This is definitely his baby, and he is the main player. He monopolizes the call. He goes on for a long, long time, especially right up at the top of the call. Even if you just look at the transcript, which again is in the Washington Post, and you can probably find it pretty quickly. But yesterday at some point I circulated the link to it. I'll put it in the roundup today. But you can tell how long he goes on for, and he gets into the detail. He's totally obsessed in this thing. Like I'm totally obsessed by the part you'll find at 51 minutes and 6 seconds, as I say, FTW for the win, but somebody else says for the wind, and I think that's quite right. But listen to what he says and how he says it and how long he goes on for. And listen to it again in new context. I'm commenting here in the tweets about it. He will not shut up about doing this crime. And it's amazing. And now, with the additional context, now knowing that we have the texts from Meadows' phone, Mark Meadows' phone, and that among these texts are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But among his texts is a text I think might be from Raffensperger or someone on the Raffensperger staff. They're trying to get word to Trump to shut the hell up. And, I mean, it's a pretty incredible thing. He's begging in the text, please, let's end this call. And the subtext of it is, let's end this call because the president is committing a gigantic crime here and encouraging me to commit a gigantic crime here. And the longer you let him stay on, it's already been an hour, the longer you let him stay on and do this, the more evidence there's going to end up being of his criminal activity, which is kind of they don't say that because that would be too much of a giveaway because they were the ones that taped this call. Don't forget that. But in the context of these Meadows texts, it's really interesting to realize that's why it's back in the news. Please shut him up. Please, can we end this call? You should also note, by the way, it's still my belief that Raffensperger's objection to doing what the president wants is not a moral objection. He's objecting on, civic grounds that the law, the current state of the law then in Georgia, doesn't permit him to do the things that the president is asking him to do. So he's opposed to doing it. but he's not opposed to it morally. And if the law were to authorize him to do what the president was asking, not necessarily the part about just make up 11,000 votes so that I can win, but rather, bring the legislature in, have them void things, or call back the Board of Elections, make them void things. This was stuff that was not authorized by law, and Raffensperger didn't want to do it. But if it was authorized by law, he probably would consider doing it. It's just the problem was he didn't want to get caught violating the law. Now, of course, Georgia law does permit it. I don't know that Raffensperger would refuse that request this time, but he's definitely very uncomfortable. You should listen to that. And while we're listening to tapes, I also chimed in with this on Twitter. I also always advise everybody to go back and listen to the recording of what was then the House Republican leadership in 2016. I refer here, of course, to the infamous conversation in which, or I guess I should say, the conversation in which McCarthy infamously makes the serious comment that he later dismisses as a joke, that he thinks Putin pays Trump. Everyone remembers it for that. You know why I remember it, but I'll just remind you or tell you for the first time if you're joining us after my last commentary on this subject. That conversation should have been listened to again in the context of Trump's first impeachment, but you can listen to it again now and be reminded of what a travesty it was that he wasn't removed from office the first time. The whole conversation is actually about Ukraine and the larger plans that the Russians were then executing, not only to overturn democratic elections in Ukraine and of course invade Ukraine and annex large portions of Ukraine, if not the entirety of Ukraine, but that they have plans to do this in terms of interference with democratic elections all over Western Europe and the larger West, including the United States. And that they're noting that the earlier part of that day, Kevin McCarthy at least, had spent with the then Ukrainian prime minister, who had come all the way from Kyiv to Washington, D.C., to warn American politicians and elected officials of Russian activity, not only in Ukraine, but that Russian activity would spread to infect the rest of the West as well. That was their goal. That's what they were doing, and everybody needed to be aware of it. They needed help stopping it in Ukraine, but you also had to be aware of the fact that it was coming for everyone, including the United States. And once McCarthy says he thinks Putin pays Trump, that distracted everybody and distracted even the journalists covering the discussion, and they focused on that. And I wish we had gone back during the first impeachment to remind everybody that the Ukrainians were desperate to bring it to America's attention that they were being sabotaged and undermined by the Russians, and we missed the whole thing. We just looked the other way. Trump, of course, took us in the other direction and did everything he could to sabotage our being able to help them withstand the sabotage. And then Americans' political attention was distracted by the Putin pays Trump thing, and nobody realized what was going on. And nobody realized we all realized how dumb Kevin McCarthy is, that there was a major international warning sign not only just flashing on the board, but brought to the United States all the way to Washington, D.C. to stick in front of their faces. And they still didn't register it. The rest of them kind of registered it. That's what the conversation is about. And then he derails it with the Putin comment. I definitely recommend everybody listen to any tapes you can get, quite honestly. So you should all take a look and pay attention to it, and then listen to the part that we really like.
We found a way in other states later. Excuse me.
Okay, excuse me. All right. Well, at any rate, that's enough fun with that. What was happening in Virginia that so incensed Brian Beutler that he had to tweet about it, and the New York Times that they had to write about it? And the answer is protect abortion rights? ? Virginia Democrats' vacation plans get in the way. Oh, boy, that's not so great. Shot of the floor of the General Assembly for whatever reason, and illustrating sort of the COVID times, but with all the plexiglass boxes around everybody's desks. It's very interesting. Everybody lives in their own cubicle. So what's going on here? The subheader says, some Virginia Democrats want to codify abortion rights into state law in their final weeks in power, but several state senators do not want to upend their travel to Hawaii, Europe, and Africa. Okay. I see what you mean, Brian. Reed Epstein and Lisa Lehrer report this. Democrats have less than a month left controlling Virginia before Republicans take over the House of Delegates and the governor's mansion. With the clock ticking, many in the party want to seize what they see as a fleeting opportunity, protecting abortion rights by codifying them into state law. Well, one of many opportunities Virginia missed, including like actually redistricting things to Democratic advantage, because something, fairness, blah, blah, blah. It would be hypocritical of us to gerrymander when the other guys are constantly gerrymandering, and we're mad about that, but we should also sacrifice our position in the House of Representatives to be good guys. But I think we're too far gone on that one. But yeah, I mean, I guess I could see, we should remember that one objection to rushing through a statutory protection for anything in the last couple weeks before Republicans take over is that in a couple weeks Republicans take over, and they can just undo it, but, you know, you want to put them on the spot to undo it, right? You should, if you protect, you know how it is. The truth is that the majority of people actually support keeping the status quo and keeping legalized abortion protected, even if there are people who are themselves morally opposed. They, you know, and from a civic point of view, think, look, the only thing to do is to keep it legal and let people make those choices. At least that's what the polling tells us. So, you know, there's real reason to do something like this. Protect it statutorily and, you know, let the Republicans make their first act upon returning to power in Virginia be stripping away that right. That's okay. I mean, politically speaking, we do a good thing by bringing attention to it. We do a good thing by attempting to codify the protections, and we do a good thing by showing you that Republicans will repeal it. I mean, you might think, well, it was useless if you know Republicans will repeal it. Well, would you rather, I mean, is that an excuse not to do it? No, not really, because then you would say, well, when Democrats had the chance to protect this in law, they didn't, but only because we thought the Republicans would undo it. Well, then let them undo it. Make them actually do the act. That's what's driving this, I think. But anyway, it doesn't matter because Democratic leaders in the state Senate have dismissed the idea, and not on policy grounds or over concerns about political messaging. Several of the chamber's members don't want to change their vacation plans. One senator is traveling to Africa because it's important to Virginia that we know what's going on in Africa, I guess. Others are in Europe, and the majority leader is headed to Hawaii. They're not going to be able to get back. Flights are booked this time of year. The majority leader, Richard L. Saslaw, said in an interview from California, where he was en route to the Aloha State. The state's General Assembly does not allow proxy or remote voting, even though they're all living in boxes, and would be better off probably voting remotely. And Democrats' paper-thin majority in the state Senate requires all members to be present to pass contentious legislation. We discussed it, Mr. Saslaw said. There are too many people out of town. You should have discussed it earlier. As abortion rights stand on a national precipice, with the Supreme Court likely to roll back or overturn Roe v. Wade next year, Democrats have issued dire warnings about the potential consequences, which could include at least 22 states moving swiftly to ban or severely restrict abortion access. The party's options are limited at the federal and state levels, but many of its lawmakers have vowed to do whatever they can to protect the right to an abortion, except skip a vacation, I guess. Yet, as the intra-party dispute in Virginia shows, the party's leaders are often wary about confronting the issue head-on. Congressional Democrats have been unable to pass legislative proposals to protect abortion federally, and President Biden has yet to utter the word abortion publicly. Many lawmakers in the party, as they continue to grapple with the pandemic and economic uncertainty, seem unwilling to prioritize abortion rights to the degree that some Democrats believe is necessary, given the threats from the Supreme Court and conservative state legislatures. In Virginia, where Governor Ralph Northam has long been a champion of abortion rights, Democrats' 21-19 majority in the state Senate includes moderates and one member who opposes abortion rights, so it might be more difficult than you think. But beyond abortion politics, there is a split in Richmond between younger and more activist Democrats in the State House and the Senate Democrats who adhere more to the old, quote, Virginia way of doing state business, which is, I guess, apparently to leave the state and not do that business. That's weird. But anyway, it's Commonwealth business. They are less willing to embrace extraordinary measures that go beyond the state's regular legislative sessions, which are held only at the beginning of each year and are finished for 2021. Sally Hudson, a Democratic delegate from Charlottesville, said she worried that the administration of Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, would roll back expansions of reproductive health care access like the abortion pills that became available by mail in the state. That's not a bad idea. In October. We've got 2 years to do our job each term, and I don't know why we wouldn't use all the time to do our jobs during that term, Ms. Hudson said. If not for Roe, for what? Good question. Abortion rights activists say the situations in Virginia and Washington underscore a lack of true commitment from Democrats, maybe, who have spent years campaigning on preserving the constitutional right to an abortion. Has a point there. The Democratic Party is clueless right now about the abortion access crisis, and it's really dispiriting to see them trumpeting the same old rallying cries, said Aaron Matson, a founder of Repro Action, an abortion rights advocacy group. Democrats in the Virginia Senate argue that it would be impossible to call the chamber back to Richmond in the next month, and that even if they did, there was no guarantee that the party would have enough votes. That's probably true. It's a close call. There's more to it, but we got to take our 2-minute break. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think I will have to continue with this because there's some other interesting points made in the piece. So I'll continue on, except I scrolled down to see what other interesting things there were, scanning. So I got to find myself on my way back here. There we are. Right, no guarantee that the party would have enough votes even if they did call everyone back. You're in the holiday season. Some people are making plans of being away, said Cray Deeds, a Democratic state senator from Bath County. What's your reality of getting people to Richmond, and what's realistic to pass that we haven't already passed? Well, yeah, okay, but it's an echo of the Democrats' rationale in Congress, where their proposals stand little chance of becoming law under the Senate's current legislative rules, which require, of course, 60 votes to proceed. That's a better statement of it than 60 votes to pass anything. A liberal group of senators trying to change those procedures to enact voting rights legislation has so far been thwarted by a few centrist Democrats. That's a wrong term for them, but okay. In Virginia, Democrats considered taking action in November as they reeled from their electoral losses, but decided against it. Then a series of Supreme Court rulings and hearings on abortion rights heightened the urgency for Democrats, with Republicans set to take the House majority on January 12th. Mr. Youngkin will be inaugurated as governor 3 days later. This is just interesting, like that point there. They thought about doing something, then they decided against it because they figured, I don't know what, maybe we won't have to, something, nothing bad will happen. Then there were these Supreme Court decisions. But it's a real lack of vision, that they couldn't figure out that abortion rights were going to be in jeopardy. I mean, come on. Anyway, I'll continue on here. Tarina Keene, the executive director of NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia, an abortion rights group, said she had first proposed a post-election legislative session to address abortion rights in the 2 days immediately after the November election, when Democrats were stunned by Republicans' victories in the state. Ms. Keene said part of her argument to Virginia Democrats was that Republicans in other states facing the imminent loss of state house control had used lame duck sessions to cement an advantage for themselves before Democrats took office. Yes, she has been awake and reading the news and heard what we all heard, and I think we had something to say. I don't believe we actually addressed it in terms of abortion rights, but we definitely mentioned, in other states, when control changes over from Republicans to Democrats, the Republicans have a special session and move all the power away from whatever branch of government Democrats are taking over, which, again, could largely be undone once Democrats get in. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But, yeah, we're not doing that great with responding to these things. But basically, she's saying, look, this is something they do all the time. We should do it, too. And I know I brought it up in some other context, and thinking about it, I recall bringing it up, and I think maybe even Armando was on the show. We were saying we should do this, even though it can be reversed, and I mean, that's maybe it would render it ineffective, but make them reverse it. That's okay. If you don't, they'll just undo whatever protections you leave in place as it is. Like, this article goes on and sort of discusses that dynamic, but I'll continue with it as written rather than try and write it on the fly for them. Where were we? All right. So Ms. Keene said part of her argument was, look, Republicans do this all the time. We definitely mentioned to folks that they would do that to us, Ms. Keene said. We've seen it in North Carolina and in Wisconsin, she said. Those are two very recent examples of what they're willing to do to undermine the other side. Catherine White, who runs Network Nova, Northern Virginia usually, a collective of dozens of liberal organizations in the Washington suburbs, yes, has begun a campaign to pressure Virginia's Democratic senators to return to Richmond. She said Democrats' overconfidence that their candidate for governor, Terry McAuliffe, would win had left them unprepared for the question of protecting abortion rights. Okay, right, but then when they lost, what was her name? Ms. Keene said, okay, you lost, so here's what we should do now. And they ignored that too. But true, there was no plan to go big and go bold because they didn't plan on losing, she said. Since Virginia Democrats took control of Richmond in early 2020, they have fulfilled their promises to roll back Republican-enacted abortion restrictions, but they have left the door open for Mr. Youngkin to place administrative roadblocks in the way of abortion access. But there, I guess, is the real reason to worry is not so much the administrative roadblocks as, well, when Virginia Democrats took control, they rolled back Republican-enacted abortion restrictions. So what do we think Republicans are going to do when they get control? They will roll back the rollback. I don't know why they think they have to limit themselves to administrative roadblocks. Mr. Youngkin downplayed his opposition to abortion rights in his general election campaign, but in June, he was caught on an undercover video taken by a Democratic activist saying he would go, quote, on offense if he won and Republicans took control of the House of Delegates. A Youngkin spokesman said the governor-elect's previous remarks on abortion spoke for themselves. Mr. Youngkin said that changing abortion law is not on his day one agenda, but he also reiterated last month that he would support a ban on most abortions after 20 weeks. Still, despite the potential for changes to the state's abortion laws, Mr. Saslaw dismissed the prospect of convening his chamber before the incoming governor's inauguration. He said the possibility has been discarded in November by Democratic state senators, many of whom, including him, have campaigned on pledges to protect abortion rights. They didn't want to do it, he said Wednesday. even before the current Supreme Court cases from Mississippi and Texas that could weaken or overturn Roe v. Wade. Many abortion rights supporters believed their movement faced an existential crisis. This year, states have enacted 106 abortion restrictions, the most passed since Roe was decided in 1973, according to the Guttmacher Institute, a liberal research group. Of the 15 states where Democrats control both legislative chambers and the governor's office, Virginia, Colorado, and New Mexico are the only ones that have not enshrined a woman's right to abortion into law. Other states like California and New York have gone even further, positioning themselves as refuges for women barred from seeking abortions elsewhere. In Virginia, Mr. Saslaw's position has angered Democratic state delegates who, during a Sunday night conference call, pressed Speaker Eileen Filler-Corn to push to bring both chambers back into session. Ms. Filler-Corn then told them that she would happily bring them back to Richmond, but that Mr. Saslaw was strident in his opposition, according to several delegates who participated in the call. Ms. Filler-Corn, in a statement issued by her spokeswoman, said there was, quote, no consensus among House Democrats about convening before Mr. Youngkin's inauguration. Kathleen Murphy, a Democratic delegate from McLean, that's in our neighborhood, and I think we used to be in her district at one point, about, 6 or 8 years ago, predicted that women would become outraged next year if Mr. Youngkin moved to restrict abortion access. This can't be taken away from all of us, from all women, just because the Senate has made it clear that they will not come back to deal with an issue in a timely way, she said. Although, I will point out that if they did come back and dealt with it in a timely way, then Youngkin would take it away from you afterwards, and then women would become outraged next year. But yes, that's a good point. If they came back, did their work, enshrined the right to an abortion in law in Virginia, and then Youngkin took away from them, the outrage would be, Youngkin took away our rights. And if they want to come and vote appropriately and in appropriate numbers and can make their voices heard, then great. But that'll be, and wouldn't that be the better plan than trying to tell them, well, yes, Youngkin did take these rights away from you, but also Democrats didn't actually do anything to try to secure these rights for you. But hey, please come out and vote accordingly anyway. To which at least some women will say, I don't know which party is going to stand up for me. A little bit of thought will say, all right, well, one party, like when they had the chance the first time, they did do some things. When they had the chance the second time, then they didn't do anything. The other party, every chance they get, they take away from us. And that's the reality of it. But yeah, people are going to be, I think, rightfully a little bit annoyed. Like, you were in Hawaii, huh? That seems weird. Okay, well, anyway, thanks to Brian for bringing that to our attention. That's a bit of a downer, but okay, at least we got it. It's in pocket. I'll share it with you later. What else did I have in pocket to share with you? Here's something I did not expect to be reading about, but I saw quite by chance yesterday on Twitter, and I'd love to share this one. And just keep this in mind. Every time, we get annoyed all the time whenever we hear, like, Republicans, for whatever reason, think it's safe harbor for them to say that Jimmy Carter was like the worst president ever. Or he's one of the worst presidents in modern history, and blah, 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 and malaise, and the Iran hostage crisis, and the gas lines, etc. I mean, it was a rough time, to be sure, but especially in later days, even a lot of Democrats who didn't necessarily appreciate Carter at the time. And I guess also I should point out, before we laud him on another front, and we're going to do it, we should point out he was a conservative Southern Democrat, and there wasn't, there was reason occasionally for more liberal Northern Democrats to roll their eyes and be like, ugh. I can't believe we're saddled with this super conservative Southerner, almost a Republican. But in later days, people have reevaluated that, especially as they've seen him in retirement, be just a truly incredible person, even if he had difficulty as president with his activism and, Habitat for Humanity, building houses for people. I mean, what other president has done that? Nobody. Anyway, so we've heard all sorts of things about how awesome he is in that sense, and how active he's been, and just the respect you have to have for him from simply from Habitat for Humanity. But here's something I really never heard about this. Now, who tweeted this one? Jeff Lundeen. Jeff Lundeen is a professor a physics professor, I think, at the University of Ottawa up in Canada. So what does he care about, Jimmy Carter and the American presidency, etc.? Well, let me tell you. He asks, and my answer to it is no. Do you remember the world's very first nuclear meltdown? I don't. I mean, I guess I just don't. And the reason I don't is because it was before I was born. I'm thinking I remember 3 Mile Island. Is that the one you mean? That's the one that created the nuclear meltdown scare in my mind during my lifetime. And even sparked the, I guess you would call popular film at the time, like the China Syndrome movie. But, there was a brief mini panic about the possibility of nuclear meltdowns and nuclear power stations, endangering, the existence of the world, let's say. Anyway, apparently I don't remember the world's very first nuclear meltdown because it was in 1952. Now, this is the really remarkable part. So here's how Jeff's tweet reads. Do you remember the world's very first nuclear meltdown? That time the U.S. president, an expert in nuclear physics, heroically lowered himself into the reactor and saved Ottawa, Canada's capital. I do not. I don't remember that. Now, reminder, okay, it's a little bit of a trick with the words because it did happen in 1952 and Eisenhower did not lower himself into the nuclear reactor here. Do I have the right time? Is it Eisenhower in 52? By December of 52? I got to think about this for a second. I guess not, right? I guess at the time, December of 1952, they've had the election, but is Truman still president? Well, anyway, neither Harry Truman nor Dwight Eisenhower lowered themselves into the nuclear reactor. It was Jimmy Carter. He wasn't president yet. What was he doing? Lowering himself into a nuclear reactor. What is he? He's a Star Trek guy at this point. Sounds like a schlocky action movie, like Star Trek, which I like. But it actually happened. And there's a couple of screen grabs here. One, a picture of a remarkably young looking, it's 1952, Navy Lieutenant James Earl Carter. And you can see that youthful look there for Jimmy Carter, something I never got to see. And so the second one is a screen grab from, I don't know, whether it's Twitter or I think Facebook, from the Historical Society of Ottawa. The world's first nuclear reactor meltdown occurred right here in the Ottawa Valley, and a young U.S. naval officer and future U.S. President, Jimmy Carter, was brought in and put in charge of containing the disaster 69 years ago this week. Nice. Leading a team of 24 men, 28-year-old Lieutenant Carter courageously had himself lowered into the damaged reactor. That week, Carter and his team exposed themselves to 1,000 times the level of radiation considered safe by today's standards. What's really remarkable is that happened and he's still alive. And he's 96 and still moving and building houses. He's a radioactive, he was bit by a radioactive spider, a very old radioactive spider, I guess. News of the December 12th, 1952 reactor meltdown at Chalk River sent a shockwave of panic among scientists, politicians, and the general public around the world. Hydrogen explosions followed the meltdown, which then caused hundreds of thousands of gallons of radioactive water to flood into the core. When the Canadian government turned to U.S. nuclear experts for help, Lieutenant Carter was put in charge of the urgent operation. Carter was one of the few in the world at that time with any expertise in this new technology. First, the reactor had to be shut down and then disassembled and replaced. Now, the screen cap cuts off here, and I should go look for this description, but I think there's a CNN article about it that we could read for more details. But it stops right after this little blurb that I thought was interesting. Carter had his team build an exact replica of the, and then it's cut off. So it sounds like the training involved building an exact replica of the reactor so that they could practice, getting in and out as quickly as possible so they would know the layout when they got there. Well, what a remarkable story. So Lundin, the tweeter here, then links to this CNN article about it from April 5th, 2011. Jimmy Carter's Exposure to Nuclear Danger is the name of the article. And editor's note up at the top says, Arthur Milnes, an award-winning Canadian journalist, is the inaugural fellow in political history, the writer of this piece, I guess, at Queen's University Archives in Kingston, Canada, and the editor of Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, a Canadian tribute. And this is the reason that there's a Canadian tribute to him. It's amazing. So their intro of it, just to give you a taste of how they approach it, and I guess maybe why it was written up in 2011. Though Georgia is a continent and an ocean away from the Fukushima, did they say Fukushima or Fukushima? I'm not sure. Anyway, the nuclear meltdown in Japan, and a continent and an ocean away from there, we can be confident that an 86-year-old man in that state, Georgia, knows full well the fears the Japanese cleanup crews are experiencing. The Georgian's name, James Earl Carter, the 39th President of the United States. Almost 60 years ago, a then young U.S. naval officer working at the dawn of the nuclear age with the U.S. atomic submarine program, Carter was physically lowered into a damaged nuclear reactor in Chalk River, Ontario, Canada, and exposed to levels of radiation unthinkable today after an accident. That's pretty amazing. In his own comment about it, by the way, we were fairly well instructed then on what nuclear power was, but for about 6 months after that, I had radioactivity in my urine. That's fun to know about President Carter, who at the time of this article was 86, and told the writer during an interview for his new book when he interviewed him in Plains, Georgia in 2008. They let us probably get 1,000 times more radiation than they would now. It was in the early stages, and they didn't know. So, wow. Anyway, despite the fears he had to overcome, Carter admits he was animated at the opportunity to put his top-secret training to use in the cleanup of the reactor located along the Ottawa River northwest of Ottawa. So anyway, it's a long article. You should read it. It's not, current politics, so perhaps we'll skip it for now, just to sort of give you a taste of what that episode in history was about. I thought you might find that interesting, intriguing, appreciate it, knowing that much more about Jimmy Carter. I guess, I don't know how much longer we're going to have him around, so it would be nice to be aware of this incident before he goes. Let's see. A couple other things I wanted to get to. Oh, yes, right. I had a note yesterday from listener. Oh, I guess I didn't get permission necessarily to identify him. I don't know if he's hiding the fact that he's listening, but we'll say Craig. You're not going to be able to find him based on that. Thank you, Craig, for writing with a correction to yesterday's program. I did feel a little bit confused as I was saying it, and I felt that I was on rocky footing with it. But thank you for straightening me out on this. He writes, Hi, David. I listened to today's, that would now be yesterday's, Kagro in the Morning, as I do most weekdays, and particularly enjoyed your discussion of the congressional report on the failure of the GSA, the General Services Administration, to properly award and administer the lease of the old post office building in Washington, D.C. As a longtime listener, I am well aware that this issue has been one that you and Armando discussed at length several times over the last 5 or so years, and its probable obvious conflict with the emoluments clauses of the Constitution. One minor issue, though. The GSA and GAO are not the same agency. I confused the two of them, not only because of the G, but because I was like, didn't the or was it the GSA? Or one of the G agencies underwent a name change, and I couldn't remember what it was and which one it was. And then on top of which I confused the two agencies. The General Services Administration is the executive branch agency that handles the management of many properties owned by the government, which house other agencies of the government. That is to say, those properties do, right? And also includes the awarding of contracts for basic goods and services that are used by those agencies. So they do have contracting experience. And therefore, I would hope some auditing experience. They still should have been able to spot the problem with this. The GAO, which is the General Accountability Office, which used to be the, I don't know whether it was General or Government Accounting Office, and they changed that to now General Accountability Office, is a support agency that Congress uses to audit agencies and or contracts over which Congress has oversight. Those are very generalized descriptions of the two agencies, but they are clearly not the same and are not really even related. Perhaps you were a bit confused because GAO did undergo a slight name change in recent years and used to be known as the General Accounting Office. Okay, there's the answer for that. And then thanks for all the good work, and then a nice signature. Thanks, Craig. I appreciate the note. Very true. And I think, not only did I get it wrong, but I think everybody sort of heard me, the gears turning like me going, am I wrong? I think I might be wrong here. I don't remember what I'm talking about. But, okay, yes. I don't think they're particularly easy to confuse except for the fact that there's a G in both of them. But that's it. And the G is for used to be for general in General Accounting Office. Now, I guess it is. It isn't. They didn't change the G also to government, but I guess not. I don't know. General Services Administration. I feel like they changed the G in GAO to government as well. Is that not the case? I will now check on that, or else I'll get another letter. GAO. Yeah, U.S. Government Accountability Office. So it used to be the General Accounting Office. Is that right? And now the Government Accountability Office. All right. Well, there you have it. Another little history lesson. Not as exciting as saving a nuclear reactor, but, we can't all be James Earl Carter, I guess. Okay. Even you could be James Earl Jones. That's a possibility. You have two James Earls to choose from in this scenario. Okay, so thank you for bringing that to my attention. No thanks to me for accidentally closing Pocket so that I couldn't seamlessly move into the next thing. Yes, okay, next thing I want to bring up, but we only have a few minutes, so let's skip to this one. This is sort of a weird story. You probably noticed it yesterday. I didn't know what to make of it because I never know what to make of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, except to say that they seem weird and shady, and I don't understand why people are involved in them, except that some of them make a tremendous amount of money, which is as good a reason as any to get involved in something weird. But yeah, when it gets shady is when it gets shady is when Trumps show up for it. So I found out yesterday, as you all did, that Melania Trump is going to be. I don't understand any of this stuff. But there's going to be involved in NFT. She's issuing an NFT, but she's also establishing some sort of NFT platform. And then they're going to issue, if that's the right word, an NFT of some kind that will be sold allegedly to benefit charity. Now, Melania is doing this, one, because she's got nothing else to do, I guess, and two, because she's the only Trump left that's legally allowed to be involved with a charity at the moment. I guess Barron could. But maybe Tiffany? I don't know. But anyway, the rest of them are banned from being involved with charities because they steal the money all the time. So anyway, Melania found out that this grift was still available to her because she's not banned from associating with a charity. So she would start a charity to bilk, I guess. But maybe not. Maybe she won't bilk it. Anyway, so they're doing this thing with an NFT, and I don't really know what that is. But Alexandra Petri, who may also not know anything about what it is, had a much more interesting take on it. and wrote up for the Washington Post. I saw Karen Tumulty retweeting part of it, the funny part. She grabbed out of here, but let me read a little bit of this. Melania Trump's new NFT is the perfect holiday gift/grift, let's say. She put the R in parentheses. The perfect holiday grift. It can be so hard to find the perfect gift, but great news from the family that brought you an organization that will give some undetermined amount of money to children's cancer, but mostly won't. And the malign, sentient, random word generator that produces all headlines now comes Melania Trump's new NFT platform. Do you want to give to a charity but not too much? Do you understand NFTs but not too much? Well, rest easy. Melania Trump is pleased to announce the Melania Trump non-fungible token platform, which will release NFTs in regular intervals exclusively on melaniatrump.com. The first NFT will be called Melania's Vision, apparently a breathtaking watercolor art. That is the correct unit, I think, for describing when someone paints something, just as the Mona Lisa is a breathtaking oil art, that embodies Mrs. Trump's cobalt blue eyes, providing the collector with an amulet to inspire. You know, initially I was a little worried that there might be something not entirely above board about Melania Trump's new NFT venture, which also claims it will somehow provide children from foster care with computer science skills. Are the NFTs platforms programmers' children? I assume they aren't, but this is also not how you would word it if you were trying to discreetly inform the public that your programmers are children. But now that I know that they are selling amulets, I am utterly reassured. Nothing says this is not a scam like we sell amulets. Anyway, this art will also include an audio recording from Mrs. Trump with a message of hope, which almost certainly will not turn out to be her reading a snippet of Becoming. Melania Trump is going to release more of these, including a one-of-a-kind auction of historical importance scheduled in January of 2022 that will include digital artwork, physical artwork, and a physical one-of-a-kind accessory, which had better be another amulet, or I'm going to riot. Yeah, well, we all should anyway. There's more, and of course her pieces are great. I recommend it to you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I got to go on because this is funny and we want to get to the funny line at the end here. But Alexandra Petri continues here. A portion of the proceeds, that's in quotes here, definitely doesn't need to be more specific than that, right? Will assist children aging out of the foster care system by way of economic empowerment and with expanded access to resources needed to excel in the fields of computer science and technology. Once again, I do not think, from the way this is worded, that you can rule out that Melania Trump has hired a specific child as her computer programmer, and that this is how she's describing paying their salary and letting them use a computer to set up her website. If I were hiring a child to make a one-of-a-kind Christmas knitwear to benefit myself mostly, I would say something that sounded exactly like that. A portion of the proceeds will assist young people making their first strides into the field of knitwear by way of economic empowerment and giving them access to yarn arts resources. I just think this wording should be looked at. My point is, this is great. My biggest worry at this time of year is that if I give money to charity, too much of it will go to charity. I don't want that. I want mystery surrounding all my donations. I want to have no clear idea how my money is being spent or whom it's benefiting, besides the vague sense that it is passing through the hands of Trumps. Because if there was one family in the world that I would trust to take my money, claim they were using a portion of it for possible charitable activity, and transform it into brass fixtures and grift, it would be this one. I'm just glad it's in time for Christmas. That pretty much sums it up. I don't know what the hell Melania is doing. Also, I had no idea she had cobalt blue eyes. The picture, all pictures of her, actually, but the picture of her accompanying this article shows only eye makeup, and her eyes are too, just too narrowly open for me to see. I can't even see white in her eyes. She just has two giant black holes, it looks like. And in most pictures, that's the case. That's just apparently the result of some plastic surgery, but also the makeup choices that she makes. And did you have any idea she had cobalt blue eyes? I didn't either. But I'd like to see them. Not for paying for an amulet or anything, but, whatever. Amulet. Okay. Well, I agree. Anyway, Alexandra's take on things, always appreciated. Now that leaves me, once again, without Pocket open, the way the new thing is designed. Every time you open the original article, it just goes there, but in the same window. All right, so other things that we need to catch up on are, let's see. One, what's happening with James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. They're doing terrible things again. This is about the last stupid, terrible thing that they did. And I don't know why it got back in the news, but something else must have happened. Ah, yes, new revelations about the purported Ashley Biden diary, which briefly flashed across the headlines a few weeks ago when we learned that Project Veritas had gotten its hands on it and that it was in trouble for having its hands on it. And they were, James O'Keefe was busy trying to defend himself, saying, well, we made a decision as journalists not to publish the thing. Well, apparently they weren't, you can't believe this, quite so ethical and concerned about ethical guidelines as they let on. So this piece in the New York Times, how Ashley Biden's diary made its way to Project Veritas, is in the news. Subheader reads, new details shed light on the federal investigation into the conservative group's acquisition last year of a journal kept by the president's daughter. I guess that means it's established now that that's the case, as opposed to saying it's purportedly a journal kept by her. All right. Adam Goldman and Michael Schmidt are responsible for this one, in case you get angry about it. Let's see. Here's the news. In the final 2 months of the 2020 campaign, President Donald J. Trump, his grip on power slipping because of his handling of the pandemic, among other things, desperately tried to change the narrative by attacking the business dealings of Joseph Biden's son Hunter, invoking his name publicly over 100 times. Oh, by the way, it just occurred to me. I meant to mention to you when we were talking earlier about the tape of Trump calling Raffensperger that the timing of all that was important and weird and coincidental given what else we're talking about the events of January. The call was January 2nd, 2020, so 4 days before January 6th insurrection. And the news broke and the transcript was published on January 5th. Which is really amazing and maybe accounts for why it is that it's kind of gotten memory hold and we didn't pay more attention to it. It came out, if you're ever going to bring out a tape like that incriminating, I guess the thing to do is to do it the day before you assault the Capitol and kill police officers, because all eyes will then end up on that. And indeed they have been. And there's a select committee to investigate the events of January 6th, but no select committee to investigate the events of January 2nd as chronicled on January 5th. So, but maybe they'll expand into that now that Mark Meadows' texts reveal that the Raffensperger office was texting him, please get on the phone and stop the president from doing more crime. All right, back to Project Veritas here, right? So Trump, in the final 2 months of the 2020 campaign, is relentlessly hammering on Hunter Biden. At the same time, another effort was underway in secret to try to expose the contents of a diary kept the previous year by Mr. Biden's daughter, Ashley Biden, as she underwent treatment for addiction. Now, more than a year later, the Justice Department is deep into an investigation of how the diary found its way into the hands of supporters of Trump at the height of the campaign. Federal prosecutors and FBI agents are investigating whether there was a criminal conspiracy among a handful of individuals to steal and publish the diary. Those being scrutinized include current and former operatives of the conservative group Project Veritas, a donor Mr. Trump appointed to a political position in the final days of his administration, a man who once pleaded guilty in a money laundering scheme, a man who was pleaded not guilty in one is Donald Trump, and a financially struggling mother of two, according to people familiar with federal grand jury subpoenas and a search warrant, who spoke on a condition of anonymity to discuss an ongoing investigation. Extensive interviews with people involved in or briefed on the investigation and a review of court filings, police records, and other material to help flesh out elements of a tale that is testing the line between investigative journalism and political dirty tricks. That's always where James O'Keefe finds himself, of course. The investigation has focused new attention on how Mr. Trump or his allies sought to use the troubles of Mr. Biden's two surviving children to undercut him. And that is an awfully dirty and low-down thing to do, but that's what they do in Republican politics. By the way, I want to just jump back for a second and say, testing the line between investigative journalism and dirty tricks, and saying that's where O'Keefe is. O'Keefe is there. He's near the line, but he's on the other side of the line. He's on the political dirty tricks side, and it's giving him an enormous benefit of the doubt to say that he occupies this gray area or whatever. Generally speaking, he's a dirty trickster, but what he is, he's a dirty trickster who uses the idea of investigative journalism as cover for his dirty tricks. We're just trying to find out the truth here. Except when we're trying to manufacture the truth, like pretending we are pimps or pretending we're sneaking into the United States by way of the Rio Grande, or filling a houseboat with dildos and hoping to lure a reporter in there for some unknown reason, or break into a U.S. Senator's office and bug the phones. All to investigate, that's all. Anyway, the inquiry has also intensified the scrutiny of Project Veritas, as it should. Its founder, James O'Keefe, was pulled from his apartment in his underwear and handcuffed during a dawn raid last month. Why didn't that get videoed? By the FBI, 2 days after a pair of his former employees had their homes raided. I didn't even realize that for some reason. The group, which purchased the diary but ultimately did not publish it and denies any wrongdoing, has assailed the investigation. And it has been making a case in court and to Congress that despite its use of undercover stings and other deceptive tactics, it is practicing a form, of journalism as he calls it, that deserves the same legal and constitutional protections afforded news organizations. Nope. Asked a list of specific questions related to the investigation, a lawyer for Project Veritas, Paul A. Calli, C-A-L-L-I, responded with a statement from Mr. O'Keefe criticizing the New York Times. Well, gee whiz, thanks a lot. Roberta Kaplan, a lawyer for Ms. Biden, declined to comment. The episode has its roots in the spring of 2020 as Ms. Biden's father was closing in on a Democratic presidential nomination. Ms. Biden, who has kept a low profile throughout her father's vice presidency and presidency, had left a job the year before working for a criminal justice group in Delaware. She was living in Delray Beach, Florida, a small city between Miami and West Palm Beach, with a friend who had rented a 2-bedroom house lined with palm trees. I don't think the house was lined with palm trees, but outside maybe. The driveway? Lined with palm trees, with a large swimming pool and a wraparound driveway, according to people familiar with the events. The wraparound driveway. I guess I can envision what that's about, but when I see wraparound, I usually think, wraparound porch. How nice. How quaint. Florida, wraparound driveway. Wonderful. Anyway, Ms. Biden, who had little public role in her father's campaign, had earlier been in rehab in Florida in 2019, and the friend's house provided a haven where she could avoid the media and the glare of the campaign. But in June, with the campaign ramping up, she headed to the Philadelphia area, planning to return to the Delray home in the fall before the lease expired in November. She decided to leave some of her belongings behind, including a duffel bag and another bag, people familiar with the event said, a bag of unknown type. Weeks after, and why not leave 2 bags behind, whatever. Weeks after Ms. Biden headed to the Northeast, the friend who had been hosting Ms. Biden in the house allowed an ex-girlfriend named Amy Harris and her 2 children to move in. Ms. Harris was in a contentious custody dispute, and was struggling financially, according to Palm Beach County court records. At one point in February of 2020, she had faced eviction while living at a rental property in nearby Jupiter. Jupiter, the planet, is far away. Jupiter, Florida, is nearby. You understand. Shortly after moving into the Delray home, Ms. Harris, whose social media postings and conversations with friends suggested that she was a fan of Mr. Trump, learned that Ms. Biden had stayed there previously and that some of her things were still there, according to two people familiar with the matter. Exactly what happened next remains the subject of the federal investigation, but by September, the diary had been acquired from Ms. Harris and a friend by Project Veritas, whose operations against liberal groups and traditional news organizations had helped make it a favorite of Mr. Trump. In a court filing, Project Veritas told a federal judge that around September 3rd, 2020, someone told the group described as a tipster called Project Veritas and left a voice message. The caller said a new occupant moved into a place where Ashley Biden had previously been staying and found Ms. Biden's diary and other personal items. It's interesting. Found. Well, she left it behind, and I opened the bag and looked at them and then read the diary. That's not so good. But probably shouldn't have left that stuff there, too. The diary is pretty crazy, the tipster said on the voicemail, according to a Project Veritas court filing. I think it's worth taking a look at. In a recent letter to Congress, a lawyer for Project Veritas said it had been told the items had been abandoned in a room where Ms. Biden had stayed. Project Veritas has acknowledged buying the diary through an unnamed proxy from two people that identified in court as A.H., I guess we know who that is, and R.K., but said it was told they had acquired the diary lawfully. People involved in the case have identified A.H. as Ms. Harris and R.K. as Robert Kurlander. Mr. Kurlander, a self-described venture capitalist, is a longtime friend and former housemate of Ms. Harris. In October 2020, days before the election, Mr. Kurlander said on Twitter, "Where are Biden's two kids?" adding, "Ashley and Hunter are disasters, reflection of the parents." One of whom died in a car accident. But okay. In 1994, Mr. Kurlander pleaded guilty in federal court. Reflection of the parents, no doubt. Pleaded guilty in federal court in Florida to a conspiracy count in a drug-related money laundering scheme that also led to a guilty plea from David Witter, the grandson of the founder of the investment firm Dean Witter. You look like you just bought drugs from David Witter. Kurlander. Mr. Kurlander was sentenced to 40 months in prison. How do you like that? So he was a drug dealer and got busted on that. And now he says, I'm not a drug dealer. I'm a venture capitalist. Okay. A venture capitalist with not enough money to help his destitute friend, I guess. Ms. Harris is fully cooperating with the investigation and will remain responsive to the government's request for evidence and for her version of events. Her lawyer, Guy Fronston, said in an email, "When the facts emerge, it will be clear that my client has information relative to the investigation, but no culpability." Outside the house, or his house, last month near a golf course in Jupiter, Florida. Actually, there's a golf course in Jupiter, Florida that Trump owns, but I don't know if this is the same one. There's probably several. Mr. Kurlander declined to comment, but a woman with him, whoever that might be, acknowledged they had been dealing with the matter and wanted to avoid public attention. She provided the name of their lawyer, who declined to comment. Mr. Kurlander also provides a potential link to the possible role of a number of Trump supporters. Among those whose conduct is being scrutinized in the investigation is a woman with ties to Mr. Trump, Elizabeth Fago, F-A-G-O, Fago, a Florida businesswoman and Trump donor who was nominated by Mr. Trump in December to the National Cancer Advisory Board. She's pro-cancer. She's advising it how to kill people. Ms. Fago appears to know Mr. Kurlander. A picture on social media shows them dining together in July of 2020, probably maskless. Well, I guess if they're dining, they certainly would be. But probably outdoors. It's Florida. Investigators are also looking at the role of Ms. Fago's daughter, Stephanie Walczak. It's, I guess, W-A-L-C-Z-A-K. Ms. Fago visited the Trump White House at least twice. Her son, Joey Fago, a real estate agent who this year worked with Donald Trump Jr. and Kimberly Guilfoyle on their purchase of a $9.7 million Florida mansion, posted a video of him and his mother at the White House on election night 2020 and at a Christmas party the next month where they can be seen in the West Wing, and also got COVID probably. She and her son also met Mr. Trump on the tarmac of the West Palm Beach airport in 2019, and another picture shows the two together. In 2016, she co-hosted a fundraiser for Mr. Trump at his club at Mar-a-Lago. That year, Ms. Fago gave $15,400 to pro-Trump fundraising committees and an additional $7,600 to the Republican National Committee after Mr. Trump won the party's nomination. In October 2020, she gave $500 to pro-Trump committees. It remains unclear how Ms. Harris and Mr. Kurlander made contact with Project Veritas and what role others might have played in facilitating the transaction. Ms. Fago did not respond to requests for comment. Ms. Walczak declined to comment. Spokesman for the FBI and Justice Department declined to comment. Now, ready for this? Using the diary as leverage. Less than a month before Election Day, in an October 12, 2020 email that Project Veritas included in a court filing, Mr. O'Keefe told his team that he had made the decision not to publish a story about the diary, adding, "We have no doubt the document is real, but that reactions to its publication would be characterized as a cheap shot." I can't believe that stopped him. There must be another reason. But Project Veritas was still trying to use the diary as leverage because of how moral they are, of course. On October 16th, 2020, Project Veritas wrote to Mr. Biden and his campaign that it had obtained a diary Ms. Biden had, quote, abandoned, and wanted to question Mr. Biden on camera about its contents that specifically referred to him. Should we not hear from you by Tuesday, October 20th, 2020, we will have no choice but to act unilaterally and reserve the right to disclose that you refused our offer to provide answers to the questions raised by your daughter. Project Veritas's chief legal officer, Jared T. Ede, E-D-E, wrote, J-E-R-E-D, Jared, E-D-E. Ede? I don't know. Anyway, by the way, good lawyering there. Wow, how scary is that? If we don't hear from you by Tuesday, we'll have no choice but to reserve the right to disclose that you refused our offer to answer questions. Like, that's... So what, right? I mean, that's... You see, this happens all the time, and newspapers, the most they can write is they decline to comment. But they're trying to turn it... Like it's weird. Like, they're trying to get accused of threatening Biden. And I mean, they sort of do. But it's weird to try to puff up your language like that to make the threat more serious when it's not going to work out for you, for one thing. You're not going to get your way. And two, why would anybody say yes to this? If we don't hear from you, we're going to tell everybody that you didn't answer our questions. Yeah. So what? You know, it's weird. And they could have said, if we don't hear from you, then we'll just publish the diary. And that might have worked, but they were unwilling to do that. So I don't know. I mean, at that point, they just should have said, this is a total loss. In response, Ms. Biden's lawyers, not Mr. Biden's, Ms. Biden's lawyers accused Project Veritas of threatening them as part of an extortionate effort to secure an interview with Mr. Biden in the campaign's closing days. Ms. Biden's lawyers refused to acknowledge whether the diary belonged to Ms. Biden, but told Mr. Ede that Project Veritas should treat it as stolen property. The lawyers suggested that serious crimes might have been committed and that any suggestion that the diary was abandoned was ludicrous. Ultimately, one of Ms. Biden's lawyers, Roberta Kaplan, told Mr. Ede, "This is insane. We should send to SDNY." I guess maybe that's a text or an email. Shortly thereafter, Ms. Biden's lawyers alerted prosecutors at the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, which is now overseeing the case. Why them? I don't know. Why not Florida? Why not Delaware? Not sure. They thought they'd get a sympathetic ear there. They know it's a powerful office. I don't know. In the midst of this exchange, a conservative website, National File, never heard of it, published excerpts from the diary on October 24th, 2020, and the full diary 2 days later, though it got little attention. The site said it had obtained the diary from someone at another organization that was unwilling to publish it in the campaign's final days. Mr. O'Keefe's lawyers said in a court filing last month that Project Veritas arranged for Ms. Biden's items to be delivered in early November to the police in Florida, not far from the house where she had left them. As the investigation came to light last month, Mr. O'Keefe said in a statement that Project Veritas gave the diary to law enforcement to ensure it would be returned, or could be returned to its rightful owner. Probably an easier way of doing that. But a Delray Beach Police Department report and an officer's body camera video footage tell a somewhat different story. You lied even about that, huh? On the morning of Sunday, November 8th, 24 hours after Mr. Biden had been declared the winner of the election, a lawyer named Adam Leo Bantner II, arrived at the police station with a blue duffel bag and another bag. What is this bag? I mean, they're making it sound like they don't want to tell us what kind of bag it is. Is it like a paper bag from, the Dildo Emporium or something? They don't want to say. It's just another bag. It's weird. Anyway, according to the police report and the footage. I'm sure there's nothing weird about the bag. Mr. Bantner declined to reveal the identity of his client to the police. Project Veritas said in court filings that it was assured by the people who sold Ms. Biden's items to the group that they were abandoned rather than stolen. But the police report said that Mr. Bantner's client had told them that the property was, quote, possibly stolen. And, quote, he got it from an unknown person at a hotel. That is pretty shady sounding. The video footage, which appears to be a partial account of the encounter, records Mr. Bantner describing the bags as crap. Like, we found all this crap, or we got all this crap, I guess, as opposed to, like, what a crappy bag this is. The officer can be heard telling Mr. Bantner that he is going to throw the bags in the garbage because the officer did not have any information or proof of evidence. Like I said, I'm fine with it, Mr. Bantner replied. But the police did examine the contents of the bag and quickly determined that they belonged to Ms. Biden. The report said the police contacted both the Secret Service and the FBI, which later collected the items. So that's pretty shady all around. Like, I sent some unknown party sent a lawyer to bring this to the police station, and it's and the cops say, well, we can't use it as evidence. We don't know anything about it or its provenance, so we're going to just throw it out. And at that point, like, I guess panicky lawyers like, fine, that's okay. I don't care. Throw it out. See if I care. Just so long as you don't connect it to me. And it's better if you throw it out, and then it can never be used as evidence against me. And then they realized, what the hell would a lawyer be bringing his garbage to a police station for? Would you throw this out for me? That can't be right. And they looked into it. And lo and behold, what do you know? And it ends, at least, or eventually progresses to the point where James O'Keefe gets dragged out of his house in handcuffs in his underwear. And that's pretty good. I like that. I'm glad I didn't really have to see it, I guess, depending on what kind of underwear he wears. But I like the idea of it happening, even if I didn't. I said I wanted to see it. I want to see him dragged around in handcuffs, but not in his underwear necessarily. But, I don't know. Maybe it looks better than I think. All right. Time for another break coming up here. And I'm trying to think, what do I want to squeeze in before we go? There's an article. Why did this come to mind? It's an old article. But I guess someone was it was being passed around on Twitter like, this didn't age well kind of a thing. So I'll read you that quote that didn't age well rather than the whole article. Well, the article is from November 10th, 2020. So like heading into the post-election crisis. And this is really it, I guess. The headline here, or should the headline will give it away. So why don't I just run down to this part of the piece itself. It's an Aaron Blake piece in The Fix, and it reads thus: when the history of the Trump era is written, we'll struggle to find quotes that are as revealing as one recorded Monday evening by the Washington Post's Amy Gardner, Ashley Parker, Josh Dawsey, and Emma Brown. It's a link, of course, to their piece top Republicans back Trump's efforts to challenge election results. That's as early as November 9th, 2020, that they're backing this crazy plan. They don't wait until January. Speaking about President Trump's and his legal team's myriad and baseless claims of massive voter fraud, an anonymous senior Republican official offered a rhetorical shrug. This is kind of interesting here. I'm a little late with the music. Here's the quote. The quote, the worst aging quote of all time, I guess. What is the downside for humoring him for a little bit of time? No one seriously thinks the results will change, the official said. He went golfing this weekend. It's not like he's plotting how to prevent Joe Biden from taking power on January 20th. He's tweeting about filing some lawsuits. Those lawsuits will fail, and then he'll tweet some more about how the election was stolen, and then he'll leave. What a remarkably bad prediction. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Of course, we're behind in the music, and it's oh my goodness, I'm distracted again. But we were cut off in the middle of the accounting, I think, of what's going on. But I'm now distracted by another crazy possible Trump recording that everybody seems to be talking about on Twitter, and that I have missed out on up to this point, but I will get back to it in just a second. Let me grab this and one other thing I saw fly by on the same subject, because apparently I'm missing out on all this stuff. Greg's watching it happen and retweeting all this stuff too. So, all right, but I got cut off in reading that horrible thing, so hopefully it wasn't too anticlimactic, but you got the main part of it. It's the incredible beginning of this. What's the downside of humoring him for this little bit of time? No one seriously thinks the results will change. Oh, this is the one. It's not like he's plotting how to prevent Joe Biden from taking power on January 20th. Then goes on to say he's tweeting about filing some lawsuits. Then those lawsuits will fail, and then he'll tweet some more about how the election was stolen, and then he'll leave. Indeed, what's a little undermining of democracy between friends, writes Aaron Blake on November 10th. Well before we find out that, no, actually, he is plotting to try to prevent Joe Biden from taking power on January 20th. What a serious misreading of events. That's just, I guess, the worst quote of all time, the worst aging quote of all time. And I thought I would share it with you because it's just terrible. Now, the thing that's happening in the background is Maggie Haberman's tweeting around of, well, let's see, she's tweeting, what's happening here? Where's the provenance of what's happening here? Yonit Levy is tweeting around this and who is Yonit? She's evening news anchor for N12 News, which I don't know. Where is that? I am not sure. What is N12 News? An Israeli news station. So, okay. That explains what's going on here. And maybe you already know this because you've been watching this instead of listening to the show. But new quotes from Trump, Yonit says. I mean, Yonit Levy, the name tipped me off that this might be an Israeli person, but wasn't positive. But anyway, new quotes from Trump to Barak Ravid, diplomatic correspondent at Walla News and an Axios Middle East correspondent, apparently. New quotes from Trump to Barak Ravid. Most U.S. Jews don't love Israel. Interesting. Okay. And then a comment from Jordan Weissman, writer at Slate, who says, you'll recall Trump making more or less the same argument when he said American Jews were disloyal to Israel. I'm pretty sure this is going to become a cornerstone of conservative anti-Semitism. Israelis good, American Jews bad. Okay, very interesting. And I guess why? Where was the Maggie Haberman part of it? She was tweeting it around too. And says, quote, but I'm not sure whether she's quoting or she's imagining the quote coming from Trump later on at some point, or Trump supporters saying, and they're Jewish people that run the New York Times. So anyway, what's the thing? There's a transcript of it, 44 seconds of nonsense here from Trump. But I guess if I pocket it and then bring it up on the big show computer here, we might be able to play the audio and get it on the air. Let me work with the sound here and turn up the volume on Firefox so that when we play this tape, we'll get it. And let's see, view the original, bring us to the tweet with the embedded video in it. And like I said, 43 seconds of Trump garbage. Let's turn up the sound and see if we can't hear it.
There's people in this country that are Jewish no longer love Israel. I'll tell you, the evangelical Christians love Israel more than the Jews in this country. It used to be that Israel had absolute power over Congress, and today I think it's the exact opposite. And I think Obama and Biden did that. And yet in the election, they still get a lot of votes from Jewish people, which tells you that the Jewish people, and I've said this for a long time, the Jewish people in the United States either don't like Israel or don't care about Israel. I mean, you look at the New York Times. The New York Times hates Israel, hates them. And they're Jewish people that run the New York Times. I mean, the Sulzberger family.
There's the reference. Okay, so there's a quote. That's Haberman pulling the last line of the quote. It's Jewish people that run the New York Times. So, okay, yeah, setting up your basic anti-Semitism campaign, I guess. And just, it's interesting, too, that they love using that against Jewish Americans and, no matter how they turn, right? So if they support Israel, then they say you have dual loyalties. And if you don't support Israel, or at least you don't support certain policies of the Israeli government, then they say you're disloyal Jews, you're bad at your religion, or your religion doesn't count, or you should be persecuted for clinging to that religion. It's an interesting thing, but I guess, you can't win with anti-Semites if you're Semitic. So no surprise there. And he's just an old fart. And he's sounding old and more decrepit every day. But okay, just thought I'd bring you up to speed on that. Donald Trump is an anti-Semitic jerk, despite the fact that, he lets lots of Jews count his money, I guess. He's really excited about having that happen. All right. Well, anyway, back to Pocket and other stories that I wanted to share with you. So we got the worst quote of all time part out of the way. Here's an interesting development too. Speaking as we were about Melania's crazy NFT thing, how about switching back over to the weird SPAC, SPAC, whatever thing about Donald Trump launching his new media thing with the weirdo venture capitalists. The New York Times has this story. A former insider at the company merging with Trump Media sues over, quote, brazen fraud. A story by Matthew Goldstein, and it reads this way. It's a little bit complicated, and it doesn't sound like the guy is totally, he's not a whistleblower per se. He thinks he got cheated out of money. He wanted some of the brazen fraud money and didn't get any, I think is what happened. A former nominee for director of the so-called blank check company that plans to merge with former President Donald Trump's social media startup is suing, claiming he was frozen out of the deal. Brian Shevland, the former nominee, is seeking monetary damages over what his suit calls a brazen act of fraud. The lawsuit, which is aimed at the chief executive of Digital World Acquisition Corp., the Special Purpose Acquisition Company, SPAC, that raised nearly $300 million for the merger, was filed in Miami federal court on Tuesday. Mr. Shevland, who runs his own investment management firm, says that he only found out that he was no longer a nominee for the company's board when Patrick Orlando, Digital World's chief executive, filed a document with the Securities and Exchange Commission that no longer included his name. That's some way of finding out. The lawsuit says the unexplained removal from the filing in August, a month before the Digital World's initial public offering, cemented the freeze-out of Mr. Shevland, who said he was owed 7,500 shares of Digital World and was deprived of his right to buy more shares at a low price. The suit says Mr. Orlando broke a commitment to involve Mr. Shevland in other SPACs. Okay. So I guess maybe this hints at or helps us. Will it help us clear up the weird thing we read the other day that had been retweeted by NYC Southpaw that alleged that there was some kind of weird, shady dealing going on with buying shares, offered to insiders that they were allowed to buy at a certain price and guaranteed a profit, et cetera, et cetera. Is that what this is about? In the lawsuit, Mr. Shevland claims he was instrumental in securing the deal with Trump Media and Technology Group and raising capital for Digital World. The lawsuit does not provide much detail about the role Mr. Shevland, the chief executive office of, it says office, but officer maybe, of Bluestone Capital Management, played in the merger talks. But it does confirm reporting by the New York Times that Mr. Orlando and his colleagues were in talks with representatives of Trump Media earlier this year. Digital World last week disclosed that the Securities and Exchange Commission had opened an investigation into the events surrounding its communications with Trump Media. When the acquisition companies, which are known as SPACs, go public, they are not supposed to already have merger target in sight. The Digital World had said in its filings that it had not engaged in any discussions with any potential merger targets before its initial public offerings in September. That's interesting. So in order to make this weird kind of company work, you're supposed to take it public without having an acquisition target in mind, and everybody's basically supposed to say it's a gamble. We don't know what they're going to try to acquire, but if you want in on the gamble, go ahead. But if you are just going to go on the market with the idea in mind is we will acquire this company, then that's not a thing that they can, I guess, securitize, right? I guess you could just have people buy into a private equity offering, into a pool and say, our goal is to acquire this company, but that comes under different rules than going public with an acquisition firm. Anyway, so I guess they broke that rule and decided to hint to people that what they were really about was acquiring Trump Media, and that artificially inflates their price. Digital World disclosed last week that the Securities and Exchange Commission had opened an investigation into the events surrounding its communications with Trump Media. When acquisition companies, which are known as SPACs, go public, they're not supposed to already have a merger target in sight. Digital World had said in its filings that it had not engaged in any discussions with any potential merger targets before its initial public offering in September. That would put them, if true, in compliance with the rules. But as it turns out, other people say, no. By the time they went public and filed this paper, they had already talked to Trump Media. The Financial Industry Regulatory Authority is looking into trading in Digital World securities before the announcement of the deal on October 20th. A lawyer for Mr. Shevland declined to comment beyond the lawsuit. Mr. Orlando did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The lawsuit says that when some people associated with Mr. Orlando had initially objected to doing a deal with Trump Media for personal reasons, Shevland pushed for a reconsideration of the issue. Shevland reminded Orlando that their obligation was to ignore personal beliefs and instead to maximize shareholder value, the lawsuit said. Due to Shevland's efforts, a second vote was held whereby TMTG ultimately was chosen as an appropriate SPAC merger candidate. The lawsuit does not specify when those votes were held. Digital World and Trump Media disclosed last week that they had raised an additional $1 billion from investors to finance the merger, not refinance, to finance the merger initially. In a regulatory filing on Wednesday, Digital World paid 36 unnamed investors. I'm sorry, said, not paid. The P is an S. I was a little confused about that for some reason. Okay, so on Wednesday, Digital World said 36 unnamed investors had committed money to the private placement or private investment in public equity. The company also disclosed that an affiliate of E.F. Hutton, the investment bank pitching the deal to investors, will receive a $25 million sales commission. Wow, all the old-timey investment banks and advisors are coming up today. E.F. Hutton and Dean Witter got a call out earlier, right? All right, well, this doesn't appear to be directly related then to the weird thing that Southpaw was talking about with fixing prices for early investors to make a guaranteed profit, although maybe it turns out to be connected in some other way, but not directly to this. This is simply a guy who got cut out of a deal with Trump that he wanted to make and is angry that he didn't earn the money that would have come from being involved in this SPAC initial public offering, revealing that it may also be the case that they never should have been allowed to make their initial public offering at all because they were already out of compliance with the regulations for SPACs by the time they tried to file as one. Okay, semi-interesting. Keeping an eye on that one, just because whenever there's a 10 different possible grifts going on with one of Trump's stupid ideas, you want to keep track of all of them just to show how thoroughly corrupt he really is. That you can have 10 different frauds going on with something like this. Okay, let's see. Other things to share with you. Yes, we haven't really discussed this one, and perhaps we ought to. Oh, let me check in on this too. Was this? Oh, yeah, right. Here's a quick item I can include here that came up the other day, and I had mentioned to you that the story of Gavin Newsom possibly thinking about using the weird constitutional shield that the Texas legislators have been allowed to use by the current Supreme Court for their vigilante enforcement of their anti-abortion statutes. And couldn't we use the same thing to attack other constitutional rights, but say it isn't the state doing it, it's the vigilantes doing it, and therefore it's okay, and focus on other things like perhaps maybe guns? And that caused a lot of excitement, and it was on a lot of interest. And it's unclear about how successful they'll be because this Supreme Court is so outcome determined, so determined to have the outcomes that they want. I was thinking of the phrasing of outcome determinative, but that's not what I mean, really. But they are outcome driven. They know where they want to end up, and they make up the law if necessary in order to get there. Well, anyway, in that vein, I have a tweet from No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, a podcast, hosted, of course, by Brian Tyler Cohen, but I guess this is the podcast's Twitter account. Says, here's a new item. It was new anyway when they tweeted it on December 14th. At least one gun rights group, the Firearms Policy Coalition, is now opposing the Texas abortion law because they are now realizing that the private citizen enforcement mechanism can be used to enact gun reform. How the tables have turned. Very interesting. And of course, more news, according to people reacting to this tweet, saying New York might also pursue the same avenue as California. So that would be very interesting. So glad to have that on the record. Now, another weird story that we haven't gotten to yet, which also came back to mind this morning when I saw Jen Hayden tweeting that she had been re-listening to the tapes of the Raffensperger call. One thing that also you could note, another good reason to go back and listen to the Raffensperger call, is at least in the Washington Post version of it, there is a segment of the call in which, there are several segments in which Trump invokes the name of a person that they redact from the tape and is making all sorts of accusations saying, why aren't you looking at this person? Why aren't you looking at this person? Why don't you investigate this person? This person is at the heart of all the conspiracy. Brad, why don't you do this? Don't you know about this person? And it turns out that that person it's the name of the Georgia election, the polls worker, the vote counter worker, who was, we later learned, harassed by Kanye West's publicist for some strange reason. And that just came to light just the other day, the weird way in which they interacted. So I have the Daily Beast story about that, and I thought I should read it to you, if only because we need 20 minutes for the other story that I thought I should read you. And this one, we might only need 10. And that's kind of what we got left. How what's their name? Trevian Kutti, Kutti, went from repping R. Kelly and Kanye West to hyping a QAnon fan and Trump's big lie. Again, in the Daily Beast, Adam Ronsley and Asoin Subsang on the byline here. She pressured an election worker to, quote, confess to cheating for Biden and said she was talking with Trump's team not so long after she'd donated to Hillary. Kind of a weird person involved in all this. Donald Trump and his Republican allies' failed coup attempts got an aggressive, bizarre boost from a former associate of world-famous rapper Kanye West. The secretive pro-Trump effort by Trevian Kutti, who appears to be the only person in the United States who bears that name, according to public records databases, was a particularly baffling Coen Brothers-style twist in a sprawling anti-democratic crusade overflowing with unlikely developments. So, who exactly is this literally one-of-a-kind Trevian Kutti who took a break from rubbing elbows with the Hollywood folks and music industry elite so she could play a bit part in MAGA world's efforts to asphyxiate American democracy and keep Trump in power? Well, for one thing, she claimed late last year to be in direct contact with one of Trump's legal teams. She's posted various photos of herself posing with MAGA luminaries, including the wealthy pillow magnate, you know who that is, who personally funded pro-Trump election challenges, and once upon a time, she was a Hillary Clinton donor. Like her former employee, Kanye West, the Chicago-based publicist had a thin record of political involvement prior to the 2020 election when she became a pro-Trump activist and campaign manager for a QAnon-believing candidate who ran to take on John Lewis's congressional seat after his death. Kutti did not respond to the Daily Beast request for comment, but the former Yeezy spokes is now in the spotlight and claims to have brushed up against the senior Trump supporters like MyPillow magnate Mike Lindell and the Trump campaign's legal team, according to a review of her social media posts by the Daily Beast. As Reuters first reported, Kutti allegedly showed up in December of 2020 at the home of Ruby Freeman, a Georgia poll worker falsely accused by the Trump campaign and Trump himself repeatedly in the call with Raffensperger, it turns out, right? But someone falsely accused by the Trump campaign and conservative activists of carrying suitcases full of fake ballots to run up Joe Biden's vote tally in the state and pressured her to confess. Quote unquote confess. That's the way they put it. Kutti, according to Reuters, told Freeman Freeman was, quote, a loose end for a party that needs to tidy up, and then put her on the phone with a man named Harrison Ford, who Kutti reportedly claimed had authoritative powers to get you protection, but not that Harrison Ford. It's unclear on whose behalf, if anyone, Cuddy was acting when she allegedly tried to pressure Freeman into falsely confessing to voter fraud. A spokesperson for Kanye West said she was not associated with Kanye West or any of his enterprises at the time of the facts that are reported in these articles or since these facts occurred. On Twitter, and that's important apparently only because it was the time that Kanye West was saying, I'm going to jump into the race for president, and it was suspected that it was Trump people funding him to do so that he could siphon off votes from the Democratic candidate. Anyway, it never materialized, but I guess that's why the rest of this stuff is believable. On Twitter, Cuddy denied the Reuters story and said that she was, quote, not engaged financially by anyone attempting to provide help to Ruby. Her outreach, she claimed, came at the behest of, quote, concerned citizens and contacts in Georgia, who she said, quote, led her to believe they would provide Department of Justice sources who could grant immunity to Freeman. On social media, Cuddy has implied that she was in communication with Trump campaign officials around the time of the election. In a tweet from a different, since suspended Twitter account, Cuddy posted a picture of herself on the phone, claiming to have received a briefing on the state's post-election efforts to challenge Biden's lead in the state days before news organizations officially called the state for Biden. Haven't slept in days. Just talked with real Donald Trump legal team in #Nevada. They have been on ground all week preparing, Cuddy tweeted on November 4th. The Daily Beast contacted several veterans of Trump's post-election legal teams this week, and none said they could remember her or her name. Cuddy has also photographed at the infamous June 2020 Trump rally in Oklahoma, which saw low attendance numbers. The sparsely attended event provoked Trump's wrath at organizer Brad Parscale and may have contributed to the coronavirus exposure of former Republican presidential candidate Herman Cain, who died of COVID shortly after attending. I laugh not because he died, although that actually, that I do find humor in that, but just because I didn't realize there were other ridiculous, lunatic, crazy crap that was going to end up being associated with that particular rally. There's just so everywhere he goes, there's 15 layers of insanity going on, and you'll only find them out piece by piece. Where were we with this? Oh yes, Cuddy is visible in photographs of the rally standing next to Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt while holding signs for Black Voices for Trump, a Republican pro-Trump group founded by Alveda King, a niece of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. A photo posted to Twitter also shows Cuddy standing next to Lindell and his private jet en route to the rally. Lindell similarly said he didn't recognize her name, adding, I don't know who this person is, after the Daily Beast sent him pictures, appearing to be selfies of the two of them. He did suggest it was possible that she was in a group that he agreed to take with him to a Trump rally. Cuddy's involvement in politics dates back to at least 2007, when she contributed over $2,000 to Democrat Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. In 2007, all right, well, that's a long time ago for that one, but okay, it happened. During the 2020 election, she donated $3,000 to the Georgia congressional campaign of an avowed QAnon supporter, Angela Stanton King, after nearly half the money raised by the campaign's committee, by the way. They didn't raise that much money. Cuddy also worked as Stanton King's campaign manager until September 1st, 2020, according to the press release issued by the campaign. President Trump had pardoned Stanton King, you remember? That's how we know her name, who served 6 months in home confinement on federal conspiracy charges for her role in a car theft ring in February of 2020. She subsequently ran for Congress in the former District of Civil Rights legend Representative John Lewis and lost to Democrat Nikema Williams, who took 85% of the vote. On social media, Cuddy has posted conspiracy theories about coronavirus vaccines between posts of selfies with celebrities like Julia Roberts, Sting, and Michael B. Jordan. In one recent Twitter post, she published a bogus warning to women that they should, quote, be careful having sex with men who have been jabbed. That spike protein they now produce could be the new STD. No, it couldn't. And YouTube, we don't believe that. That's a crazy person saying that, not us. It's just a news report with a crazy person in it. Excuse me, okay? Excuse me. All right, okay, well, we got one more chance for that. Oh, if I play it, it'll interrupt the music and ruin everything, even though you'd like to hear it. But you can email me if you want to hear more Trump farting on the program from now on. Okay, I can include that. Anyway, look, there's more. She's nuts. She's weird. She's worked for weird people. Is there anything else about her in particular? I don't know. But I'm out of time to examine it. She's a weirdo. I just bring it up because it occurs to me that, again, one of the interlocking weirdness things that Trump brings with him is we heard this crazy story and we couldn't really connect it to anything except the possible, candidacy of Kanye West. But now we can connect it back to the Raffensperger call because Trump seems obsessed for a period of several minutes with insisting that this woman has to be targeted in some way. And then this other unknown idiot shows up and does the targeting of this person. But that's because he was passing around the name elsewhere as well. He's a terrible, terrible person, Donald Trump. Anyway, time now for a very good person to tell you more about how terrible he is. Justice brings you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. And yes, it's Friday. We're done.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, here's what's up elsewhere. The All-Republican Texas Court of Criminal Appeals ruled Ken Paxton cannot unilaterally prosecute election cases. And a Superior Court judge in Delaware rejected Fox News' motion to dismiss the defamation lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems. Good, great, they could be on the hook for billions.